Tercer día del Congreso de Barcelona, estamos iniciando la cobertura con un panel sobre IMS RCS Join, que es, diríamos, la tecnología que podría habilitar a los operadores la posibilidad de lanzar nuevos servicios para competir contra los OTTs. Voy a cambiar al inglés para charlar con este panel de tres personas que nos acompañan hoy. Carlos de Gemban, bienvenido, welcome to the panel.
Thank you.
Paul from MetaSwitch and Kevin from Oracle ex-Acme Packet. Yeah. If I could still use that name.
Sure.
Okay, but we'll call you Oracle. Okay. Just so people know why Oracle is on that discussion. Okay, so guys, thank you for joining us today on this panel. Thank you so much. I know your schedule is very tight. So first question, and we can address it this way if you want, so just to keep an order. So Kevin, you will be the first.
Sure.
What is, if you can describe very briefly, and feel free to interrupt each other if you want to say something, to describe the IMS market. Where are we at this point?
Yeah.
And just what's the situation?
Oh, got it. So great. So I mean, IMS, really got its start 6-7 years ago in the fixed line market. So it's not new. All of the vendors here have participated in the first fixed line rollouts over the course of the last 7 years. But the VoLTE market is really the thing that's been heralded as the thing that's going to drive IMS deployments and RCS deployments moving forward. And they've been delayed over the past several years, but we really do feel that it is pretty much evidenced by the analysts and the service providers that this year we've seen some major launches, right, especially in North America and Asia. I think you'll see that continue to grow through 2014 and 2015. I think that we're closely watching the European market with regard to IMS launches, but at the end of the day, so for voice over LTE, there's really no other way to achieve, no other realistic way to achieve voice over LTE other than an IMS framework. So it's just a matter of time.
Okay.
I agree with all of that. VoLTE, as in IR92, is clearly very important in driving IMS, but it's not the only thing. IMS is being used more and more to do innovative things in both the fixed line and the wireless space that aren't based on IR92. Big buzz around here this year is network functions virtualization, and that's driving a lot of the capabilities that IMS can now bring to the network for other services beyond just VoLTE. VoLTE is big, VoLTE is important, but it's not the only thing IMS is being used for nowadays.
Okay, Carlos, I don't know if you have something left.
Well, I have to agree with them in that part. I just want to say that IMS has a big drawback, and that is it's a very complex architecture. So yes, IMS is being driven by VoLTE and by many other services, but it's important to know that not everybody can afford it. Like tier 2 and tier 3 operators deploying a full IMS core, sometimes it's hard for them. So I think the three of us are doing a good effort on trying to make sure that we have also options so that they can have alternatives to behave outside the door like IMS by putting interfaces on our SBCs that allow them to look like an IMS network in the outside, but then handle the signaling in the media inside their network in a more affordable way. So in that part, IMS as an interconnection standard and an interoperability standard is going to be the major activity everywhere, but then inside you're going to see the big guys are going to be using IMS cores and the small ones are going to be using alternative solutions that allow them to actually be able to afford these kind of things.
Okay. We've heard in the market companies suggesting that perhaps it's not IMS what operators need, perhaps they could just use kind of an OTT type of model instead of running IMS. And for what Carlos is saying, and I agree, probably you both could agree with that, IMS has always been described as an architecture that is expensive and it's difficult to put in place for the operator. It's difficult to integrate with the network. Does that mean that virtualization, as Paul was saying, could drive IMS because its deployment resembles what the OTTs are doing with whatever technologies they are using to offer voice over IP or messaging like WhatsApp or whatever? Kevin, if you want to start.
Oh, no, absolutely. So yeah, there certainly are alternatives. We've seen also not only with regard to IMS specifically, but some of the RCS initiatives, our over-the-top initiatives, hosted services here in Europe and globally, and some of the wholesale service providers are looking at hosted mechanisms. And by the way, so an IMS is just a framework for the delivery. There are different ways to achieve the same goal. I think all the big companies can agree on that. I think Oracle's offered up solutions that are more simplified, integrated, and cost-effective, either IMS in a box or even non-IMS session management, but ultimately providing those objectives for over-the-top service providers to deliver services. And I just want to say, network function virtualization, I don't necessarily see that as a driver for IMS. I see NFV as a driver for making IMS a little more agile and to affect the total cost of ownership for an IMS infrastructure, which has been a lot of the reason for the delays in many of these deployments.
Well, solving the cost implementation
Yes.
probably is
Now, I'm going to slightly disagree with Kevin there.
perfect, because this is a debate, so we need to disagreement
A
here.
year ago, NFV was all about saving capex, saving opex, simplify my network, and just roll in racks of Dell servers.
Yeah.
Now I think it's being seen as, quite rightly, a means of achieving innovation. That's what IMS was meant to achieve by letting application servers come in more easily to the network, let the operators work with smaller vendors to get that innovation. Best example I can think of, I've had a number of carriers talk to me who have already built or are in the process of building out VoLTE in a traditional style, full IMS network, proprietary hardware, etc. They get to the point where they have millions of subscribers running on it, but that was hard work. They now regard that as a system they don't want to break. So when they want to do something innovative, maybe it's hosted business, maybe it's some other
somewhere
service,
else.
then they need to roll up another IMS core. And the last thing they want to do is to go and buy another old-fashioned IMS core. So NFV lets them just spin up a dedicated core for a dedicated service. NFV lets them scale that if that proves to be successful, all without risk of breaking the core fundamental service that they built in the form of VoLTE.
And I think we're actually in agreement on that one, because I do believe that
I thought we might be really.
No, so seriously, because many people ask the question is, how does NFV impact the overall IMS equipment market? And I see that basically you've got rollouts happening today or in place with existing infrastructure, say fixed line or VoLTE, but over time as NFV matures and orchestration matures, you're going to see a second wave, I believe, of IMS deployments, and service providers look at that decision. Do I continue to ride my existing infrastructure, or do I introduce another option which provides an additional layer of agility, an additional layer of cost savings, right? So it's going to be an evolution. I think,
What is your take with the NFV?
Well, I have to agree mostly with him in the fact that NFV was presented as a way to reduce capex and opex, and it's obviously a way to introduce services faster, which was the initial promise of IMS. The problem that happened with that is IMS was supposed to accelerate time to market, but the reality is that the carriers that were using IMS were still in that old mindset of everything has to have a process of soaking, integration, validation in the carrier style, and that resulted in 12 to 8 months of putting a new service into the market. That doesn't fly today when you have people like Facebook, WhatsApp, or other operators.
IMS didn't deliver the promises.
No, because the thing is IMS made things more complex. NFV is going to simplify things because all the complexity of the different nodes that you do on IMS, when you turn into a virtualized environment, it turns into different virtual machines that you can just boot up, and if you do really a well or a good implementation of NFV and you do an elastic cloud system where capacity can stretch according to demand, which not everybody's doing, but if you achieve that, it's much more simple delivering IMS now. But the reality is, what we believe is they're going to have a mix between certain things are going to have to go in IMS, and VoLTE is a one candidate because one of the main points in VoLTE is going to be interoperability. People are still going to be able to do roaming, and that's the only way you can guarantee things are going to work between operators when you have a standard in place. But for many market-specific applications, we believe that many of the operators are going to have to go the OTT way and have their own end-to-end apps that may benefit from IMS or may just run separately in another virtual machine and use just a straight IP pipe over LTE or any other way of media. But I think you guys are on the same page too in here.
So for what you're saying, could we agree on the fact that perhaps companies like, or operators like AT&T, Verizon Wireless, Telefonica, might run an IMS core the traditional way, it's hardware and the way it was meant to be, so to speak, because they have the scale and they want to do it the traditional way because they feel more comfortable. And as you were saying, with NFV, still you need to prove that you can get that elasticity and that cloud and those things working that are so new that perhaps a Verizon Wireless and a Telefonica are not up to, we're going to do it.
Right, so
but then you have the tier 2 and tier 3s that may say, no, those routes, I don't have that much money, so I need to be innovative.
I think a key example there are the hosted business services. I mean, there's an area where service providers will certainly look at that as an opportunity to differentiate themselves above and beyond the IMS infrastructure and introduce some of the upcoming technologies like WebRTC, for example, in those examples. So those are definitely OTT, opportunities for people like AT&T.
Okay.
Yep. I think you'll actually see a mix. So if I've already built an IMS core, I will build that the old-fashioned way and continue to scale it out because I've gone through all that testing that you referred to. Anyone doing a greenfield project now will be looking very seriously at doing that greenfield project with NFV. Okay. But even in the OTT world, IMS is a good architecture. maybe not all 38 different boxes that are spread around, but as you said, split up into a sensible, sideways scalable architecture. We've actually seen some OTT players who are building essentially an IMS network as it looks from the outside, precisely because of the quality of the thinking that went into that architecture. But they're building it in an NFV way, they've got the elasticity, and it gives them all the benefits they want, as well as the smaller players looking at it as a means of making IMS affordable.
Actually, you said something, Paul, that just caught me a little bit off guard, which is the fact that some operators are, and I don't know if you've seen that too, and I'm not saying it's true or not, I mean, obviously I believe you, but the fact that they are running like 2 IMS cores. One would be for voice of VoLTE, and the other one for other services. Is that actually happening? Is it horrendous to hear that they have to run 2 cores? We're trying to simplify architecture?
Well, if nothing else, there are carriers out there that are bigger than 1 core. They have to run multiple cores anyway.
So you're seeing that happening?
You'll see that in multiple
Well,
places.
you'll see some large service providers have different generational cores
Okay.
with different vendors.
Okay.
But I think what you're getting at is that there are OTT plays or service providers looking at OTT-like environments using IMS principles, right? Well, it may not be a full-blown, IR94 3GPP compliant IMS core. They're taking the same orchestration principles around services, service chaining, and centralized subscriber management, which were 3 of the principles around IMS, and they're taking them into an over-the-top world using the same products and infrastructure, albeit at a different scale.
And just the architecture of the way you split out the routing on one side and scale that independently from the call control and from the applications. That part of IMS is fundamentally good engineering, so people just
and it
follow
guarantees interoperability, which is also important for the OTTs. But still, the key here for the operators is going to be how willing you are to focus on IMS in specific areas, but then be willing to risk at some point to be able to gather an opportunity that's limited in time to go with an off-the-shelf OTT application, just put it in the market, even if it's not fully cooked. Because to the Google guys, it doesn't matter. They're always in beta, but people are still using their services. So sometimes you got an opportunity to, for a certain event, you get an innovative application, you need to put it there for 2 weeks and then take it away. If you follow the IMS procedures, it's going to take a long time. But for everything else, I think having an IMS solution is a solid proposal, because at least it guarantees interoperability. And if you have an issue with the network, you have a whole community out there that's probably had the same issue, and you can learn from their mistakes or from their experience to try and avoid that happening to your solution.
Okay, to finalize this discussion, very quickly, I'm going to say one word that you already mentioned, and then you tell me what you think is going to happen with it. WebRTC.
Right. So WebRTC to some degree is just yet another access point technology for the existing infrastructure.
Disruptive?
So I don't believe it's disruptive from the sense of the end-to-end communications. I think you'll see WebRTC integrating with IMS cores. I think you'll see a big play for hosted business services. I think the enterprises will lead in terms of the WebRTC deployments. I don't think that from an IMS perspective it's disruptive.
There are use cases where I'm already in a browser, I want to start up a voice or video session. WebRTC fits that perfectly. It does not yet have any means of providing the same experience as a native Android or iOS client, and it won't do for quite a long time. So it's an addition to what people are doing. It doesn't replace it and won't do for a number of years. Okay. But you have to build both.
Unfortunately, I'm going to have to disagree with them.
Excellent.
WebRTC is very disruptive, maybe not from the technological point of view, but from the business point of view. For a user, they don't really care if it has the same capabilities of an IMS client. The users want to find a way to communicate that's easy, fast, and affordable. WebRTC is going to be disruptive because there's going to be a lot of new companies that are going to leverage WebRTC to do specifically that, over-the-top point-to-point solutions that don't require any routing or any interoperability, and they're going to be competing against the business proposals and the consumer proposals of operators. So our advice to them is actually embrace WebRTC today. There is solutions today that allow you to integrate, as I said, WebRTC into an IMS environment, put a WebRTC gateway in there, and leverage that, but still be open to allow your carriers to deploy over-the-top applications if they're necessary. So again, it's not one size fits all. You're going to have to be adapted. That's the main advice here. You have to be ready for change.
Excellent.
That's it.
Carlos, Paul, Kevin, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
And enjoy the rest of the show.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you guys.